in the day should the subvariant enter the country.
Possible na yung surge ay maging may similar trajectory do sa nakita natin noong January na mabilis siya makapanghawa, mabilis dumami, at baka mabilis rin bumagsak yung bilang ng kaso.
The Health Department is urging the public to get their COVID-19 booster shots after the detection of the country's first case of the Omicron BA.2.12 subvariant.
You have to remember the things that government wants you to follow so that hindi masyado tayo mahirapan and we will prevent another surge.
Health authorities say the entry of the new Omicron subvariant in the Philippines could trigger an increase in COVID-19 cases, but only if immunization is low and protocols are not observed. How fast will the boosters be given to ensure protection? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. We will be joined by our guests and the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay and with us online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, tas mamaya po sasamahan tayo ni Edling Gao dito sa Mandaluyong.
Hello.
No, good evening.
Good evening.
Before we get to everything else, we're going to talk about Ami, Kerwin Espinosa, recanting his testimony against Leila de Lima.
Oo nga. Pero sabi ng mga prosecutor, hindi naman daw maapektuhan. He is not really a witness against her.
Oh, pero
Actually, ang apektado dito ay yung drug war program
Yun na
ng gobyerno.
Oo.
Talagang tagilid sila. I mean, in the sense of, tama-tama, inamin din ni President Duterte in his press con, no? Na siya na mismo nagsabi, nag-fail talaga yung kanyang, hindi niya na-achieve yung kanyang, at campaign promise lang daw yun out of hubris, no?
tsaka talagang mauungkat lahat ng alaala ng mga tao, lahat ng katanungan dyan sa drug war na yan, and it just goes to show na hindi pa tapos ang usapan sa war on
Hindi
drugs,
talaga.
and there will be a lot of reckoning on that front. In the meantime, habang inaantay po natin yan, we will talk about other things tonight. We'll start with COVID. Now joining us, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergera, spokesperson for the DOH. Good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs, Yusek.
Good evening.
Good evening, Yusek. We miss you.
Good evening to all of you.
Now, ma'am, syempre, usap-usapan yung sub-variant ng Omicron. But before I get to that, I wanna touch on something we actually started to talk about kanina sa big story. Yung numbers natin ngayon, sinilip ko kanina, no? Yung daily case rate, mababa pa rin. We're still in the low 200s, something like that. Pero, dinami ko lang po, factored in na po dyan yung mga malalaking rally na nakita natin, and for that matter, Holy Week?
Yes sir, no? So katulad ng sabi ko sa inyo kanina, dumaan na po yung Holy Week, nag-umpisa na po yung mga campaign rallies and sorties start February. Pero hindi pa rin ho natin nakikita ang significant increase in the number of cases. Although our national case right now would be 215 cases per day, nakakakita po tayo ng mga kaunting pagtaas sa iba't ibang areas but not significant. And also, what would be most important, kahit may mga konting pagtaas sa ibang areas, health systems capacity is manageable. Less than 20% po ang utilization ng mga kama sa buong bansa.
Okay, so to ease us into this discussion about the Omicron subvariant, if one of the factors that we are looking at is the possibility na bakunado yung mga tao, also a lot of people got infection, so there is that natural immunity also that could eventually wane. But what does that mean kung factored in yung mga malalaking rally? What does that mean? Does that mean na necessarily na handa tayo para harapin tong subvariant na to?
Well, we had been through a lot of increase in cases in the past. Ang pinakaiba po sa ngayon, kung sakasakaling mangyayari ito, mataas na po ang bakunahan sa ating bansa. Unang-una yan. Pangalawa po, yun pong ating natural immunity na tinatawag. No? Nung nagkaroon po ng pagtaas ng kaso noong January to March, marami nagkasakit, natural immunity is there. And as I've said a while ago to you, the question right now, how long will that immunity last? Kaya kailangan magpapabooster po tayo lahat.
Yun nga ang tinatanong sa lahat ngayon, di ba? Both the natural and yung ang from the vaccine immunity, nagwe-wane na, and there are observations na we tend to have surges about every 3 to 4 months, and sabi nga ng OPTA, ang binabantayan daw nila is not countries like South Korea, but South Africa, dahil yun daw mga trends doon ang medyo kapareho natin. And now South Africa is experiencing a surge from the Omicron subvariant na nandito nga ngayon sa atin. So how worried should we be? Kahit, well, siyempre mag-umpisa yan sa isa lang pero we don't know kung kakalat, di ba? How worried should we be at this point?
Unang-una, sinasabi ko nga po, it is good to worry, no? Because we will be more aware and more cautious if we worry. Pero hindi natin kailangan magpanik. Kasi katulad ng sabi ko, pag tayo nakamask, pag tayo bakunado, hindi po natin kailangan mag-worry na tayo ay magkakaroon ng severe infection, mauospital. Kailangan lang we continue to practice the safety protocols. As for the national situation, the probability of having increase in cases is really high. Dahil po may bagong variant, pangalawa, dahil nakita po natin yung mga crowding events, yung crowded events, yun pong nakita natin marami na rin hindi sumusunod sa minimum public health standards. At hindi pa ho dito matatapos ang crowded events. Dadating pa ho yung eleksyon natin by May 9. No? So marami pa ho tayong ine-expect na mga ganitong gatherings. The key would be, first, everybody has to receive their boosters. Meron ho kami ngayong bagong projection kung saan tinignan na po, nilagay na, finactor in na dun sa assumptions na ginagamit, yung waning immunity ng population. Pinakita po dyan sa projection na yan, galing po sa autumn projections yan, kaparte ng faster projections natin. Pinakita na kapag dumating tayo dun sa point na 50% of our population immunized, ay bumaba na yung immunity nila because nag-wane talaga ang immunity, we will have increase in the number of severe and critical infections. Mas mahirap po yun. Kasi okay lang, we live with the virus, magkakasakit ka mild kasi bakunado naman tayo. Pero pag dumating yung time na nawawala na yung protection, severe and critical cases na makikita natin doon. So mas problematic po yun para sa atin.
If 50%
So how do
is
you
a
fight
number
this
that we're
sorry.
yeah, if 50% is a number or rate that we're looking at, do we have a way to tell kung where we are with respect to that critical level?
Well, right now, 51 million individuals or Filipinos are already eligible for boosters. Ibig sabihin, kaya ka-eligible, nakalipas na yung 4 na buwan na meron ka nung protection. So ibig sabihin, yan na yung oras no, takda ng panahon na bumababa na yung immunity mo. These 51 million Filipinos, only almost 14 million have received their booster. So if you remove the 14 million, we have about 37 to 38 million individuals who are already eligible and have not received their boosters yet. So pag tinignan ho natin, umuurong po yan kasi as we go by the time, meron nagkakaroon ng second dose tapos magbibilang ka ng 4 months. So moving po yan. Pero pag tinignan natin sa ngayon, I think vulnerable na yung population kasi nawawala na yung protection na binibigay ng bakuna.
Unfortunately, the population is also very complacent, no? Because I hear people saying, dami-dami na ng campaign. And in fact, Father Austriaco himself said, no, na considering that there have been so many super spreader events, and yet the numbers stayed very low, no? This also kind of like assures us na mukhang hindi magkaka-surge in the foreseeable future. Now, it's also, I'm sure, a function of complacency. No, there's no need or urgent need to have a booster. How do you fight that complacent tendency now? Considering too that people are now going back to work. Life is normal. Traffic is bad. I don't wanna, I myself, don't wanna have to, go out of my way just to get a booster. May ganun,
siguro ma'am, mag-announce kayo ng shortage, dadagsa lahat yan.
What we are doing right now, talagang intensive ang aming generation for demand for boosters. Talagang nilalabas namin yung mga pag-aaral na lumalabas na inapektuhan na ng Omicron ng ating mga bakuna, bumaba na ang ating immunity, nagwe-wane over time, and if you receive your boosters, as much as 81%, you'll get again protection against severe disease and hospitalization. That is really parang giving them the exact information. That's what our experts are giving us. The second would be we have now expanded our strategies in order for us to have more access or public have more access to these boosters and to the vaccines. Pumupunta ho kami sa workplaces, nagbabakuna ho kami sa mga call center, pumupunta ho kami sa mga simbahan para magpabakuna. Inilalapit po namin sa komunidad ang bakuna para lang may uptake. But unfortunately, up until now, hindi pa rin po ganun ang uptake ng ating booster doses.
Habang mababa po yung uptake and we're talking about, habang mababa yung uptake and we're talking about people deciding for themselves. But what are the implications for face-to-face classes and their children if the parents and the grandparents are the ones not taking their boosters? I imagine nadidelay rin yung face-to-face classes.
First, sir, for the Department of Education, they did not mandate that that vaccines are required for students to go back to school. What would be required would be the teaching and the non-teaching personnel. Yun po ang kanilang binigay na protocol. Ngayon sa CHED po, yung higher education, yan ni-require po ng CHED na kailangan bakunado ang bata bago sila makapasok. So we in terms of the younger children, wala naman po tayong iniisip na mandato talaga para magbakuna sa mga bata para makapasok sila. Kaya lang meron pa ring agam-agam ang mga magulang sa tingin ko kasi hindi pa rin yata ganun ka ganda ang uptake ng mga pinagpapa face-to-face classes natin.
Ako mababa pa rin yung booster uptake, especially the second dose, no? I understand mababa talaga yung reaction eh. Are you planning to expand soon the coverage of the second boosters? Kasi sa ngayon, puro yung ano lang, diba? Yung immune compromised lang, yung severely immune compromised.
Yes, ma'am. No? So actually, ngayon, yung second dose na sinasabi niya, yung second booster, no? This is the fourth dose. Opo. Ang fourth dose po, ang binibigyan pa lang natin ng guidelines would be the immunocompromised. Yan yung may completed evidence talaga. Ngayon, ang sinasabi nga namin, aantayin natin no, bago makapagbigay ng positive recommendations ang ating Health Technology Assessment Council. Pero kailangan balikan po natin. You cannot have your fourth dose if you do not get your third dose. So ibig sabihin, kailangan pataasin muna natin din yung ating third dose bago tayo mapunta sa fourth dose. Ang sinasabi po ng ating ebidensya would be third doses, no, yung boosters natin sa healthy individual, enough yan sa atin hanggang sa ngayon. We are still being protected as long as you receive your boosters. Only for those immunocompromised, kasi yung immune system po nila hindi na as robust as our immune system na pwede tayong makapag-produce ng antibodies as you know, ASAP, no? Pagka na-receive natin ang ating bakuna. Iba na po sa immunocompromised. So third doses are very important. Napaka-importante po for the general population.
Mabuti po nabanggit niyo yan because kanina naisip ko ang linawin yan. Yung nung nabanggit niyo yung ang dato sinasabi sa fourth month, 'di ba? Yan medyo bumaba. You're talking about people who got their first 2 doses tapos doon mo bibilangin yung 4 months. We're not talking about bibilangin mo 4 months from your booster.
No.
Okay.
What would be most critical for the population is the third dose. This is your booster shot. Now, it's different when we talk about immunocompromised. After your third dose, you need another dose, which is your fourth dose.
What about yung marami kasing ang bine-blame din nila ay yung low masking observance ng mga Pilipino ngayon. First of all, how do you measure that really? I mean, kasi sinisisi talaga nila na, naku, bumaba na yung masking rate ng mga tao. Again, no, babalik din ako doon. Parang, nagulat nga ako doon, Yusek, because ang impression ko, naging habit na ng mga Pinoy ang mag-mask, no? I was in a beach recently, and even in the beach, they were wearing masks, which to me was a pleasant surprise, no? So for the government to say, "Naku, ang baba na ng masking," nagugulat ako doon. How do you measure that? And how do you keep it up?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, ang mga Pilipino po, isa sa mga bansa sa ASEAN na may pinakamataas na rate of masking. Masunurin tayo basic tayo dun sa mga Pilipino, no, na kapag may mga ganitong protocol, matagal bago sumunod, pero susunod at susunod. Based on a John Hopkins University study, which was done, I think November it started and then ended January or February of this year, 90+% po tayo sa masking, ang mga Pilipino. So doon pa lang po talagang makikita natin that we are really compliant, no, to this masking. Ang tanong, tama ba ang suot natin sa mask, no? So unang-una yan, makikita natin, we will observe a lot of people wearing mask pero nasa bibig lang, wearing mask pero nasa baba lang. Pangalawa, dito po sa sinasabi natin na bumababa, how do we measure? We have violations, no? Our local governments through the PNP are conducting this monitoring, no? Utos yan ni Secretary Anyo. So every month may pumapasok po sa ating mga datos na bigay ng PNP, yung pong mga violations sa minimum public health standards. Nakasaad dyan isa-isa. masking, yung physical distancing, mga ganyan, crowding, and all of these kind of violations. So nakukuha natin dyan yung rate actually, base dun sa resultang binibigay sa atin. At sa base naman dyan, maraming violations, no? Kaya lang, makikita pa rin po natin na yung masking talaga is being retained. So kung meron man tayo nakikita ngayon, pangilan-ngilan siguro, yun yung naobserbahan. Pero I think Filipinos, in general, nandyan na yung kanilang na-imbibe na yung practice of masking. Kailangan lang isuot ng tama.
Pero in fact, sabi ni Interior Secretary Anyo nga tumaas nga daw yung mga violations 5.4%. Saka sabi niya, gusto niya dahil dito, baka maging trend daw, gusto niya to tighten the protocols for compliance. No? Are you in favor of that? You think there's a need for better, not enforcement, but to encourage people?
Of course, we will always be in favor sa mga ganyan pong mga panukala na magkaroon tayo ng mas mataas na compliance sa mga tao. Kasi isa ho yan sa key, plus vaccination, yung minimum public health standards. Now, how do we encourage? How do we also monitor and enforce? So siguro, yun po talaga, because if you go to a place, you tell them, you should wear your mask, you should do this, you should do that. But at the end of the day, pagdating yan sa mga bahay, pagdating yan sa mga medyo comfortable na sila sa mga tao, minsan nakikita natin na hindi na rin po nasusunod. So this has to be strategized, kailangan pag-usapan maigi.
Kamusta naman po mga ospital natin, logistics-wise, human resource-wise?
We had been through the Omicron, and during that Omicron, nakita natin medyo nag-fare well na tayo, better comparing to the Delta situation that we've had. Ang ating mga ospital, bagamat na puno during the Omicron, hindi tayo na-overwhelm. Nakita ho natin yung health human resources kung paano natin naitalaga rin ang mga ating mga healthcare workers during that time. So I can say that we are prepared right now, but of course, resources would always matter, especially for those smaller facilities kung saan healthcare workers really ay kailangan talaga. As to our tools to fight off this COVID-19 virus, may mga gamot na ho tayong bago. Nung Omicron pa lang, nagamit na yan, mga Molnupiravir, pumapasok na ho ngayon yung Paxlovid. May mga gamot na ho na nagagamit ang ating mga doktor para mas mapagaling natin ang mga pasyente natin. So I think we are better prepared compared to the previous. We already have mobilized and have informed our hospitals to be prepared if in case may tumaas ng kaso para hindi tayo nagugulat.
Pero pagka sinabi niyo pong pumapasok na itong mga gamot na to, Molnupiravir, Paxlovid, hindi pa po ito nasa merkado or nasa mga drugstore. I mean, what level of access do the people actually have to these drugs?
Well, we recently had a policy. It's an administrative order coming from the DOH where nilabas na po dyan, and FDA also had an issue once that we can already have some access, some lang, dun sa mga FDA-certified pharmacies na pwede na silang magbenta nito mga ganitong klaseng gamot as long as prescribed by a physician.
So is it safe to say that we're not going to be seeing alert level 0 in the foreseeable future?
Unang-una po yung alert level 0, we don't want to use that anymore because it has created confusion sa public. Pero yung alert level 0, ang equivalent niyan, yung lahat ng area sa bansa natin mapunta na sa alert level 1. Yun pong ating mga kaso, nakikita na natin for 2 incubation periods, maybe 1 month or 2 months pa nga, mas matagal, na talagang nakita natin na very manageable na. And we can see that our healthcare system is well prepared already at ang bakunahan mataas na. Hindi lang nationally, pero lahat ng region sa bansa. So pag dumating tayo dyan sa point na yan, we can say na we are shifting already to our new normal. Now, kailan ba natin yan makikita? Sa ngayon, we cannot say na it's going to happen in 2 to 3 months maybe because the threat of the variants are there. Vaccination is still low. Booster doses are still low. So kailangan pa ho natin pataasin ang immunity ng ating populasyon bago natin masabing pupunta na tayo sa estado na yan.
Well, speaking of bakunahan, you're also intensifying the immunization for non-COVID diseases, especially children. Kumusta po yun? Second day ngayon.
Yes, ma'am. So we have a total of I think it's 2,000 plus, no? But I'm not really sure. Ito po ay supplemental, kumbaga, supplemental immunization activity. We already have our regular vaccination days for our children in our local facilities. Gusto lang natin ma-emphasize yung importance. Gusto lang natin madagdagan yung access ng mga tao. So we will have this every last Thursday and Friday of each month of April, May, and June. Just to jumpstart, no, at ipakita yung value. You know what? We have 1.1 million children who have missed their doses for our primary vaccines last year. So ngayon po, kailangan habulin natin lahat yan para hindi tayo magkaroon ng outbreak ng tigdas, magka-outbreak ulit ng polio.
Ma'am, susugal ako ng isang tanong and I hope it leads to some hopeful news. Because nung nag-umpisa at nagbabakuna tayo, everybody said, "Nako, mukhang may dengvaxia factor dito." No? Parang people were still hung over that vaccine hesitancy carrying over for dengvaxia. But after 2 years of vaccinations, may opposite effect po ba ang COVID vaccination? Is there a positive effect on vaccine acceptance in our people? Especially given that, over all other things that need vaccines?
Well, I think so. Nung nag-umpisa po tayo, nung nagkaroon ng kontrobersya dito sa bakunang sinasabi nyo, that was in 2018. Nakita natin talagang bumagsak po ang ating vaccine acceptance, vaccine confidence. Ang dami pong mga nanay hindi na nagpunta sa mga health centers, ang daming batang hindi na bakunahan. As a result, we had outbreaks of measles, outbreak of polio, at kung ano pang ibang mga sakit noong 2019. Ngayon pong nag-umpisa ang COVID-19 vaccination, we started off also na mababa ang confidence ng tao sa bakuna. Pero ngayon, based on the latest survey, only 8% among our population are still hesitant to receive the vaccine. So I think tumaas po ang kumpiyansa, nakita po ang epekto ng bakuna, nakita na safe pala at may dekalidad talaga ang bakunang to because it's protecting our population.
Okay. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, ma'am, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat.
Salamat, Yusek.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. When we come back, Ed Linga will join us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. We're still with Lucy Cruz Valdez and Ami Pamintuan. And now joining us in the studio is Ed Lingao of One News. Welcome, Ed.
Welcome and almost happy weekend.
And ikaw na magpakilala sa guest natin.
Okay, joining us tonight is Attorney Gilbert Andres, Chairman of the Advocates for Freedom of Expression Coalition Southeast Asia. Attorney Andres, welcome back to the Chiefs and good to see you again.
Good evening to the Chiefs.
Good
Good
evening.
evening, Attorney.
Yes, sir. Well, let me start off, sir, with a conversation we had with Professor Jonathan Ong of the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Ang sabi niya kasi, he had a very interesting proposal. Sabi niya, instead of just going after these trolls or these people who spread fake news, we should go after people who should be held accountable, meaning the people who are behind the organizations, the campaigners, the publicists, the ad agencies, and the funders. In other words, go for the top. Don't go for the pawns in the whole network. What do you think?
Well, all right. When he says go to the top, so what should we look for? Should we impute criminal responsibility? Should there be a crime? Kasi that's an issue. Should we criminalize in the first place fake news? So if that's the proposal, I don't agree with that we should criminalize.
Well, Attorney Andres, I'll dial it back a bit. Let's not go to criminalization. Maybe let's look at it in terms of political reform. Maybe let's look at it in terms of somehow in the same way that people say lobbying should be regulated and so on. Is there something to explore along those lines?
All right. My position is if it's state regulation, it's actually a bad antidote to fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. I think the best antidote really is self-regulation by social media platforms based on their community standards.
Yeah. Actually, that's an interesting point of view. Instead of relying on laws and the state to crack down on what is true or not, it should be people fighting back.
Yes, that's part of it. In fact, we need a multi-stakeholder approach to fake news and disinformation. Because first, when I say multi-stakeholder approach, first, the platforms themselves, they need to actually, in a sense, try to determine whether or not the postings are in adherence to their community standards. Second, there's also a need for a fact-checking network. And I know that there's a network, in fact, it's IFCN. And Facebook itself also has its own stable of fact-checkers. But I think there's a bigger issue really here. I think it's really our propensity to like lies and our attempt to know the truth. It's really a challenge right now because in fact it's not only traditional media that's bearing the news. So you also have these social media platforms that are really, in a sense, trying to compete with traditional media. So it's really an issue. How can you really determine whether one news or one information is true or false?
Well, Meta is actually it has partnered with Czech Philippines, and it has been taking down posts and accounts. And in fact, nagkakaroon tuloy na reklamo from at least one side of the political divide. At sinasensor sila. And they're saying it's an infringement actually on free expression, yung ginagawa ng Meta. What do you say to that?
Okay, sige. It's a very interesting issue. Kasi when we say freedom of expression and free speech, it's really against the state. So it's really an obligation by the state. And the state has no business trying to control freedom of expression, free press, and free speech. But when we say Meta, it's a private corporation. So the issue really there is Meta really obligated under international law and under domestic law? Strictly speaking, no, it's not. But the larger issue really there is Meta really willing to be a platform for freedom of expression in the sense na it can be false, it can be true. Kasi if that's really the commitment of Meta, then it has really no stake in trying to say that this is false or this is true. So it's really, what is the value of Meta?
But let's not talk about Meta. Let's talk about Twitter. Kakabili lang ni Elon Musk.
Let's talk about Elon Musk.
Diba?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, do you think Elon Musk buying into Twitter and saying that he's going to be an advocate for freedom of speech, is that really something that we're going to embrace and
I mean, di ba, parang people immediately say, okay, welcome back Donald Trump, welcome back attacks on media as well, welcome back, free, unfettered fighting of news, with fake news and so on.
Okay, sige. Sa Twitter, very interesting kasi, okay, it props up yung issue about Donald Trump. In fact, I don't really agree with the permanent suspension of Donald Trump's Twitter account. What I really agree with is just a period, a time period. Kasi if it's permanent, then there's really a violation of the values of freedom of expression. And let's go back really to the principle of why is there freedom of speech. It's really based on the presumption that there is a free marketplace of ideas. And supposedly, the right and the correct ideas, the truthful ideas, will really trump, okay, if I use that word, will really trump over lies, di ba, and falsity. So that's really the basic presumption of the marketplace of ideas. So are we willing to really try to adhere to that free marketplace of ideas?
I think we want to. I don't know if I don't know if the phrase is, are we willing? I think we agree. I want to. But if you look at how fake news has not only disrupted democracies and elections, but has in fact arguably led to wars, would you proceed still from the premise that there's nothing to fix? And that, in fact, the free marketplace of ideas is completely unbroken, completely 100% functioning at a time when the digital age and social media has disrupted everything.
Okay, you've raised a valid point, Robbie. Now, let's be specific. Let's just point out yung sa Myanmar with respect to the Rohingya genocide. Now, when it comes to genocide, there's really a prohibition against the inciting to genocide. And that's based on the Convention Against Genocide. So if what happened in Myanmar is a case in point that there was inciting to genocide by certain sectors in Myanmar, then that's really a violation of international. In fact, it's criminal under the Convention Against Genocide. So I would agree, if it's inciting to genocide, then all of the social media platforms and even the state can prosecute it.
Well, you're talking about fact checkers. The social media platforms have been trying to partner with different organizations worldwide. Matagal na, for years. It's for their own credibility. Pero yun na nga ang sinasabi mo, kahit ilagay mo naman niya, itambak mo yan, you are saying na mananalo naman kung ano yung totoo. The problem is, if people get flooded with all the lies and wrong information deliberately put out there, paano nilang malalaman kung alin yung tama, alin yung mali, hindi ba? So wouldn't you agree that that sort of deliberate disinformation would need some form of policing?
Oo. Kasi ang pinaka-presumption dito is that the netizen himself or herself actually knows and actually can distinguish between truth and falsity.
Na hindi ganun dito
Exactly.
sa bansa.
We have objective data, objective research showing that less than 10% of grade schoolers can make a distinction between commentary and a statement of a fact.
So paano yun? Anong remedy doon kapag ganon? You will need some form of self-regulation. No, not self-regulation, di ba? If you can regulate hate speech, why can you not regulate disinformation, deliberate disinformation?
Well, in the short run, self-regulation will work. But I think in the long run, there's really a need for social media literacy and we need to develop it in the students. Kasi mga digital, natives na to yung Gen Z So, because they're digital natives and they will live most of their lives, conscious lives, in the cyber world.
Digital world.
In the digital world,
Yeah.
then it's really important to develop their social
You're
media
right.
literacy.
I agree with you, that the challenge is really how to educate users to distinguish between what's true and what's not, di ba? But that's really, to me, the challenge. How do you go about that? And certainly, regulation has no role to play in that, di ba? Parang we should learn to test what we read, to test what we see, di ba? And have a healthy sense of cynicism. But how do you ingrain that? I don't know. That's why I asked you. Where do you start?
And I really think it starts with the home, whether we like it or not. Kasi it's really where education should start. Schools, they should not really be the first point of education. It's really the home. And I think there's a larger philosophical issue here. It's really postmodernism. Maybe, and
Yes.
to be very frank, maybe this is the effect of
Yes.
postmodernism, that there is
I
no
agree.
objective truth. It's your truth versus my
exactly.
truth. And if that's the case, your truth versus my truth, then ultimately the arbiter of truth will
Yes.
be power. And in fact, you're seeing it all around the world. Power is becoming the ultimate arbiter
Right.
of truth. And instead of speaking truth to power, we make power speak what is supposed to be the truth. So I think this is really a negation. This is really one of the adverse effects of postmodernism. And we should really go back to the notion, to the very basic value that there's really objective truth in the universe.
I absolutely agree. But have we come so far in terms of being postmodernists that is there actually hope for a return to going back to basic truths? Because the basic truths are moral truths, and I have to submit that more and more people are veering away from the moral truths. They don't like that, and I would even submit that a big part of it is in the woke culture. Too much liberalism, if you ask me. What we viewed to be right before precisely is now under question. And a few years back, I find myself sometimes wondering whether is this the right thing to say, or is this a right way to phrase it, or will I end up being bashed for saying it this way? It's a big challenge. You don't know how to navigate. I don't know. There's no question. I'm just reacting to.
Yeah, but let me bring it back to something that we do grapple with on a daily basis, and that has implications on policy debates. Recently, President Duterte vetoed the SIM card registration act because there was an insertion about na pati ang social media maapektuhan dito, na kailangan everybody use it. And all of that goes to the same concern na we don't know not only what is truth or who's posting what, we don't even know who is who in social media. Was President Duterte, in your opinion, correct to veto the SIM card registration act, particularly on that concern about requiring people to use their real names on social media?
Oh, definitely. Because in fact, it's a rider. Kasi when it comes to SIM, sige, agree na tayo na, sige, pwedeng mag-register. Pero when it comes to social media account, that's part of freedom of expression, yung anonymity mo. So, in fact, even a reference to the First Amendment, which is really American Constitution in origin. In fact, even the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, they even used a pen name, Pluvius, when they tried to rally for the ratification of the American Federal Constitution. So in fact, it's part of American jurisprudence, which we also in some sense borrow here in the Philippines, that anonymity, pen names, are actually protected by the right to freedom of expression. And in the modern sense, that's really anonymity in the social media accounts that we have.
But in the modern sense as well, I mean, just to complete this and take the other side, what what the other senators and what the other legislators were saying was, yes, but it's one thing for one man to use a nom de guerre and to have his speech. It's another thing for, somebody with money to essentially create 1,000 fake accounts pretending to be real people. And that one person can argue that, yeah, I'm also just pretending to be another person. I just happen to be pretending to be 1,000 other people. But the concern is that my truth and the truth of people and even of institutions can be drowned out by sheer brute force, by the people in power, as you pointed out. And again, another argument for maybe not immediately to regulate, but just to say, teka muna, will you at least acknowledge that lahat tayo inaamin, we don't know how to handle social media. Lahat tayo inaamin that we are overwhelmed by the technology that we don't understand and that is concentrated in the powers of very, very few people with billions of dollars at their disposal. Let's not go to the extremes that where we are completely divided, but we can still come to a certain point, diba, where before we diverge, we all agree. Can we all agree na, teka muna, time first, mukhang kailangan natin pag-isipan to. Because it is also not as simple as that anymore.
Oh, I really, really agree with you, Robbie. In fact, we need really a multi-stakeholder approach. So we need philosophers, we need psychologists. Kasi in fact, there's actually a study, I can not remember in the citation, but it's a reputable study wherein they actually found out that people really have a propensity more for the lie than for the truth. So we need psychologists, we need technologies, we need lawyers, journalists, and netizens. But let me also
Left
add,
Marites.
Marites and Tolit. But let me also add, Robbie, to what you said. There's actually an unequal treatment, okay? When it comes to private persons, they have the right to freedom of speech. When it comes to the state, it does not have the right to actually fund, troll armies, bots, and misinformation and disinformation. Why? Because of the right to information. The people have the right to information. And when we say the right to information is the right to truthful information, because you need the truthful information in order to vote wisely, in order to support policies wisely, in order to have an informed policy discussion. So it's really unequal. The state has no right at all to fund trolls and bot armies.
I think we all agree on that. But the question, I suppose, is how do you enforce that? Kasi in the end, it's easy for the state to just layer it by providing grants and assistance to
or by hiring thousands of consultants that outnumber the regular staff.
So, in the end, it's the details again, the devil.
Yes, the devil's in the detail. So I think that's where legislation can come in, di ba? Yung penalizing yung mga public officers and the use of public monies for these trolls and these bots. So more of regulation for the state and its agents rather than for private individuals.
No, but we keep opening another more and more cans of worms, because now you have to consider the character of the government who will do that.
Yes, and that's why who will guard the guardians.
Yes.
Talaga.
Kaya nga, I think as well as Center Law and the UP Institute of Human Rights, we will actually have a digital conference for Southeast Asia this May 3 at 2 to 4:30 p.m. So we will actually discuss this great issue. The title of the digital conference is Cyber Attacks, Fake News and Disinformation in Southeast Asia's Elections, the Ailment, the Antidote. So it will be via Zoom. And if you want to know that the link...
Ano yung antidote?
So may antidote na pala kayo eh. Ano yan?
General picture, sample ng possible antidote.
Well, the sample antidote really is self-regulatory schemes by the social media platforms. Like fact-checking. Like yung multiple, yung bots, na actually, part na yun ng Facebook It tries to stop, di ba? Yung mga multiple inauthentic behavior.
Oh, yun.
Context. Where do we stand there as a country against our Southeast Asian neighbors? Are we worse there? How would you score us? How would you rank us?
Oh, well, actually in 2018 or 2019, I think Freedom House in its report said that the Philippines has an army of state-funded cyber trolls. So it's been recognized by CSOs. In terms of legislation, we don't have an anti-fake news law, but we have false news in the revised penal code. But with respect to anti-fake news legislation, there is in Malaysia, in Singapore, I think in Vietnam, and I think also for Thailand, but not for the Philippines.
They have a different concept of press freedom.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
And you can argue that these are states that are less democratic than the Philippines.
Yes. In fact, Robbie being ED ng SIPA, you know this. In fact, in Southeast Asia, the norm really is when it comes to freedom of expression is there's the right to freedom of expression, except if the state will legislate national security, public health, we're the only constitution in Southeast Asia wherein we have a negative. It's in the negative. Our first amendment provision. Kasi it states no law shall be passed, abridging the freedom of speech, expression, and of the press.
Okay. Well, if you're like us, bitin din po kayo. Pakiulit, Gilbert, kailan nga ulit yung seminar nyo?
Thank you, Robbie. So this will be on May 3, which is World Press Freedom Day. It's from 2 to 4:30 in the afternoon, Manila time. And if you want the Zoom link, you can go to the website of the UP Institute of Human Rights, as well as the UP College of Law and Center Law.
Pwede bang Facebook page na lang? Can they just look for that on Facebook? Is there a Facebook page there that
yes,
they can...
yes.
Okay.
So they just have to look to the IHR, Institute of Human Rights, Facebook page.
Dapat inagahan nyo kasi that's just 6 days before elections.
Okay, May 3 po Sige. Okay, Gilbert Andres is chairperson of the Advocates for Freedom of Expression Coalition, Southeast Asia. Maraming salamat, Attorney Andres.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po. And that will be all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao and we are One News.